They told me for years there was no money in podcasting. Well, they were all wrong.
Is this a relatively new thing, or has this been around? Because I always, I for one, like when I was a kid, I kept all my Pokemon cards. I still have them at home just in case. I still have all my Yu-Gi-Oh cards. My dad has a bunch of baseball cards. So I guess that's a form of alternative investing. When it comes to comic books, specifically even Funko Pops, that's relatively new. So I guess, are you kind of taking a relatively new subject but turning it into something that's been around forever in terms of alternative investing?
So I think the investing side and the financialization of it is new in the last 20 years, where comic book collecting has always been around, but it's now really gotten a hell of a lot bigger. And part of the reason why is that there's a company called CGC, and CGC, and I actually have a CGC to show, because what they do is that they assign an objective grade to a book. And so what they do is that this is a 9.8, and so there's a 9.9 and a 10. This is the third highest grade. It's one of the best grades, because to get a 9.9 or a 10 is nearly impossible. This one happens to also be autographed. And this company is about, I think, 21 years old. And so they've created an entire business where they provide an objective grade, so that when I sell this, so if I was to sell this to you, there's no question that this is a 9.8. And so what I think has happened is that in the last 20 years or so, this company has grown, and they were just acquired by Blackstone for over $250 million to buy a 51% majority stake in them. And what's happened is that once you start going into this and grading and providing subjective objective terms to things, that's when things get financialized. And all these people have all these books, and then people say, oh, I want, this book and I want it graded, and then there's a value to it. So there's always been auctions for comics, but once CGC came on and then CBCS came later, and then a few other grading companies, it now became a much bigger business. And then also, I think people have been very disillusioned with the entire financial market and the stock market, and they're not thrilled, and they feel like they can't get ahead, but they feel that, if I buy this book, and this isn't a valuable book, but this is a raw comic book, if they buy this for $4, maybe in 10 years, it'll be worth 40, and they buy a bunch of this, they could do better than they would do in the stock market. And I think that's also that as well, where people are viewing this as the new American dream.
Right.
And I think the little guy says, look, I can't beat, the Wall Street bets traders, or I can't beat, a hedge fund, and I can't get ahead, but I could go buy a $4 item and maybe it'll 10x itself. And if I keep buying $4 items, and I think that's what's happening. And I think it's been very much sort of that trend, but has increased this dramatically.
So who determines the value? Like, say you bought a comic book back in 1994. And if for $4, and now it's worth like $500. How does that happen? Who determines it? Obviously the condition, the rarity, but is it just worth $500 because it's worth $500, or is it worth $500 because someone's willing to pay $500 for it?
It can be both.
Okay.
Where
not
obviously
a bad answer, actually.
everything is worth what somebody's willing to pay for it.
Right.
I think that's the easy, obvious answer. So when I sell on eBay, if an item is worth $500, but I bought the item for $50, I'm going to sell for $450 because I want to get out of it. And if I give up $30 or $50 on it, but I'm making a 400% rate of return,
right,
I'm not complaining.
Right.
I'm not going to give it away for $250. So it's that's sort of what it's worth. And then also people say, okay, what is the potential of it? But then there's certain things, like if you have, a book that only has 250 copies, that obviously is going to have a value built into it. Also, this book is a $4 book. If this book was $40, that also determines some of the value, because it's also what was put in and what can you get it for. So that's the other thing too that also determines value. I bought books that were $50 books that are now worth $300. If that book was a $4 book, it wouldn't be worth $300 and climbed up so fast in about 3 years, just because it's not as valuable, it's not as rare. So print run matters versus, if this book has been probably printed 3, 4, 5,000 times.
Right.
I just happen to like the cover. It's going to be put up on Instagram. It's a fun cover. I like the story. It's a cool story, and I'm reading that book more for story versus, growth. It might be in 10 years worth $6, but the idea, I think what really determines value is what people are going to pay for it, and also how rare something is. And then at a certain point, books just become that. And then everybody in the community sort of just consensually agrees, okay, this book is worth a minimum of X. And if you get it cheaper than that, you got a great deal. But this is sort of the average, because when you're listing a book on eBay or you're at a show, everybody prices similar to each other. And I think that's kind of where it goes. And then look, sometimes books fall. And look, I mean, Venom 2 is coming out. This Pop Funko is worth more right now because the movie's coming out. I have 2 of these. I sold one of them last May when the trailer dropped, and I got 60 for it. And then this Pop Funko fell down to 35, and now it's back up at 60 because the movie adds a spike to it. So that's the other thing that also affects value, is timing and relevance of characters or comic books or what's going on with it as well.